welcome to another deep dive. We've got some pretty interesting stuff to get into today.
Yeah, this one's a bit different.
It is. So someone sent us this material on, well, basically the psychology of getting rich, which who isn't fascinated by that, right? And they've actually given us two totally different things to look at.
Yeah, and that's what's really interesting about this.
Yeah. So the first one...
I mean, it's like we've got...
It's called, hold on, let me get it right. The Psychology of Getting Rich in One Chapter.
Yeah.
It's, I think, like a podcast script or something like that, really practical advice. But then we also have this really dense academic article on behavioral finance.
Yeah, almost like we're getting the Cliff's Notes and the college lecture all at once.
Exactly. It's going to be fun to see how they line up. You know, does the practical stuff actually hold up when you look at the research? So
yeah, we can see like where the advice comes from, the actual, academic grounding.
I'm into it. Okay, so both sources kind of jump right into how our brains are wired when it comes to money. Specifically, this idea from Daniel Kahneman about thinking fast and slow.
Oh, yeah. System 1 and System 2.
Right. You know, that gut feeling versus really thinking things through.
And it's funny because, you'd think most people assume they're using System 2, the rational one, most of the time.
Right. Like, I'm a logical person.
But honestly, when you look at how, especially with finances, how people make decisions, a lot of it is driven by System 1.
Yeah. And the podcast script makes this so clear with the example of those, like, crazy crypto ads you see everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Become a millionaire overnight. You know, and System 1 sees that and is like, I'm in. Where do I sign up?
It's all about those immediate emotions, excitement, FOMO.
Greed, a little bit maybe.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But the key is recognizing when System 1 has taken over, like hit the brakes. And the podcast gives this really practical tip.
I love this one.
Yeah. It says, before you make any financial decision, especially if you're feeling impulsive, write down 3 logical reasons
Okay.
why you should or shouldn't do it. So simple.
It's so effective, right? Because it's that pause, instead of just reacting, you're forcing yourself to, engage System 2.
Totally. Like, we've all impulse bought something online and then regretted it later.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
This would totally stop that. Okay, next big idea, loss aversion, which I think is huge in how we think about money.
Absolutely. It's this basic idea that the pain of losing, say, $100 hits us way harder than the good feeling of finding $100.
Right. Like, emotionally, losing hurts more than winning feels good.
Yeah, and Kahneman and Tversky actually had research on this back in, I think it was 79.
I saw that.
Yeah, and they found that people feel the pain of a loss twice as intensely as the joy of a gain. So, literally twice as strong.
Wow. Okay, that explains a lot. Like, no wonder we get so scared to take risks.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that's why understanding this whole loss aversion thing is so important, especially with money. Like, if you're terrified of investing because you might lose, you could be missing out on some serious gains long term.
Okay, so then how do we actually use this? How do we, outsmart our brains?
Yeah.
The podcast uses this great example of a 50-50 bet. You flip a coin, heads, you win $200, tails, you lose $100.
Okay.
Statistically, you should take that bet, right?
Yeah.
But most people won't.
Yeah.
Because that potential loss just feels so bad.
It's bigger, yeah, even though logically
it makes sense.
Yeah.
But our emotions are like, no way. So the podcast has this interesting way of thinking about losses. They call them tuition payments.
Okay, I like that.
It's like you paid to learn a lesson. So instead of dwelling on, I lost money, it's, okay, what did I learn from that experience? How can I be a smarter investor next time?
Right. It's like it takes the sting out of it a little bit.
It does. And they even quote Warren Buffett, risk comes from not knowing what you're doing.
That's a good one.
It's basically saying the more you learn, the less those emotional reactions will control your choices. Makes sense, right?
Totally.
All right, what's next?
Mental accounting. This one's all about how we mentally categorize money, which can get us into trouble.
Oh, for sure. It's like we put money in these little mental jars and it leads to some wacky spending habits.
Yeah. The podcast uses this great example. Imagine getting a tax refund. Most people see that as fun money and go spend it.
Right. It's different from their regular paycheck.
Exactly. But logically, it's all just money, right?
It is. But emotionally, we treat it differently. And I think the article actually quotes Richard Thaler on this. He said, money is fungible, meaning a dollar is a dollar no matter where it came from.
Such a simple statement, but so profound. It is. And that's the thing with mental accounting. It creates this disconnect between what we know logically about money and how we actually feel about it. We end up with this, money jar mentality, like this money is for bills, this is for fun, and it can really sabotage our efforts to actually save or invest strategically.
So how do we break free from these, like, mental money jars?
I think it starts with just acknowledging that all money is essentially the same. Instead of like giving it these arbitrary labels, try to focus on what your overall goals are for your money. Align your spending with that. So maybe instead of blowing that tax refund, you use it to pay off some debt or add to your emergency fund.
Okay, that makes sense. Moving on. Herd mentality and FOMO. I feel like we all struggle with this.
Oh, big time. Especially now with like social media and everyone's always talking about the latest thing.
Right, it's like everyone else is getting rich quick and you don't want to miss out.
Exactly. And the podcast actually uses the whole Dogecoin thing as an example. Remember that. Everyone was like piling in, driven by, hype and FOMO. And then, of course, the bubble burst.
Oh, yeah. A classic example of how following the crowd can lead to some really bad decisions.
And the article actually links this to the dot-com bubble, which, just shows that this whole herd mentality thing, it's not new. It's been happening forever. It's like a pattern throughout history.
So how do we avoid getting swept up in the next big craze? The podcast asks this great question. Are you investing or gambling?
Ooh, that's good. Yeah, because they're totally different.
Right. And I think that's a really helpful distinction to make. Investing should be based on like a strategy, something you've thought through, not just like this feels exciting or I don't want to miss out.
Totally. And investing is about a long game. It's not about trying to get rich quick.
Right. It's about your long-term goals and making smart choices based on research and, your own risk tolerance.
And the article actually has this quote from Robert Shiller that I think is really relevant here. He said, "Markets can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent."
Oof. Yeah. That's a good reminder that chasing those hot trends can be like financially devastating.
It is. All right, what's the last one?
Okay, last one for this section. Overconfidence. We all like to think we're like smarter than the average person, right?
Oh, for sure. The podcast actually shares this funny statistic. It says 82% of people think they're in the top 30% of drivers.
Uh-huh, yeah. Like we all think we're above average.
Yeah, but statistically, that's impossible.
Right. But it just shows how much we tend to overestimate our abilities. And the article links this to like active trading in the stock market.
Yeah.
A lot of people think they can time the market perfectly.
Yeah, and they end up underperforming like consistently.
Exactly. It's that overconfidence that leads them to make bad choices. So what's the solution? The podcast suggests automating your finances.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. Like set it and forget it.
Yep.
Invest in like index funds or something where you don't have to constantly be making decisions.
Take the emotion out of it.
Totally. And they end this whole section with this quote that I love. It's from Annie Duke, a poker champion. And she says, "Uncertainty is a fact of life. Stop pretending you can predict the future."
Oh, yeah. Like, we don't know what's going to happen, especially with money. So just accept that and make the best decisions you can with the information you have now.
So much good stuff here. I feel like we need to just like pause for a minute and let it all sink in before we move on.
Agreed. I mean, just understanding these basic psychological biases is huge for making better financial decisions. Like, you can't fix what you don't know is broken.
Exactly. All right. So we've like really dug into some of the mental traps that can mess us up when it comes to money, right?
Yeah, those biases are sneaky.
Totally. But now let's get to the good stuff, the actual strategies that can help us like actually make smarter decisions and build some wealth.
Yeah, the actionable stuff.
Exactly. So where do we even begin?
Well, I think it all starts with awareness, right? Just recognizing that these biases exist is a huge step.
Yeah. Like once you know they're there, you can start to like watch out for them.
Exactly. And the podcast, it really emphasizes this idea of pausing before you make any financial decision.
Oh, yeah. Especially those big ones.
Yeah. Or even like, any decision that feels impulsive, like, clicking buy on that online shopping spree.
Oh, yeah. Been there.
It's so easy to just get swept up in the moment. But that pause, it gives you a chance to like step back and think, okay, am I acting on emotion right now, or is this actually a logical choice?
Yeah, and if you realize like, oh, it's fear or it's excitement, that's probably a sign to slow down and like really think it through.
Right. Do some more research, consider the downsides,
Yep.
weigh your options.
Okay, I like that. So both sources also talk about having a financial plan, which honestly can sound kind of intimidating.
Yeah, I think a lot of people hear financial plan and they're like, oh, I don't know where to even start.
Totally. But it doesn't have to be this like super complicated thing, right?
Right. Just think of it as a roadmap, It helps you figure out like where you are now and where you want to go.
Okay. Yeah, like a GPS for your money.
Exactly. And a key part of that is setting goals. And not just like vague goals like, I want to be rich.
You need something specific.
Exactly. Something like, I want to save $20,000 for a down payment in the next 2 years.
Okay, that makes sense. Because if you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there.
Exactly. And when you have those specific goals, it's so much easier to stay motivated and on track.
Okay, so we've got a plan. We've got goals. What's next?
Patience. This is a big one. Building wealth, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Oh, yeah. We hear that all the time, but it's true.
It is. It's about making smart choices consistently over time, not chasing those, like, get-rich-quick schemes.
And that can be hard, right?
Right.
Especially, like, nowadays with all the messages we get about, overnight success and instant gratification.
Yeah, it's everywhere, so it's even more important to, like, tune that out and focus on your own plan.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? How do we stay patient and disciplined?
The article actually talks about these things called nudges.
Nudges.
Yeah, it's basically these subtle ways to, like, encourage yourself to do the right thing financially.
Okay, give me an example.
Like setting up automatic contributions to your retirement account. You set it once, and then you don't even have to think about it.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Or using a budgeting app that tracks your spending and, like, gives you feedback.
Right, it's like having a little financial coach in your pocket.
Exactly. It just makes it easier to stay on track.
Okay, so what about market volatility? That could be really scary, right, when your investments are going up and down?
Oh, for sure. It triggers all those emotional reactions, fear, greed.
Totally. So how do we stay calm when the market is going crazy?
Well, the podcast suggests focusing on the long game. It's about detaching from those day-to-day fluctuations and remembering why you invested in the first place.
Like, what are your long-term goals?
Exactly. Those ups and downs, they're just a natural part of the market cycle. Over time, the market tends to go up, so just ride those waves and trust your strategy.
Okay, that makes sense. So we talked about risk earlier with loss aversion.
Yeah.
But how do we actually manage risk in our investments?
Diversification is key.
Oh, yeah. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. It's about spreading your investments across different asset classes, stocks, bonds, real estate, whatever makes sense for you.
So if one investment does poorly, it doesn't, like, tank your whole portfolio.
Right. And as you learn more and gain experience, you can adjust your risk tolerance accordingly, but diversification is always a smart move.
Okay, next up, something that can be tough to stomach but is super important. Making mistakes.
Oh, yeah, we all make them.
The podcast actually encourages us to, like, embrace mistakes.
Okay.
Not as failures,
Yeah.
but as, like, learning opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all about the lessons.
Exactly. So if you make a financial misstep, don't beat yourself up about it. Instead, ask yourself, what could I have done differently?
Right. It's like turning those mistakes into stepping stones.
I like that. And both sources talk about overcoming fear, which I think is huge for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah. Fear can be paralyzing.
Fear of failure, fear of making the wrong decision, fear of not having enough.
And the podcast says, like, the best antidote to fear is knowledge.
Okay, so educate yourself, right?
Exactly. Read books, listen to podcasts like this one, talk to a financial advisor.
The more you learn, the less scary it'll become.
Exactly. And the article actually talks about this idea of a growth mindset.
Okay, what's that?
It's basically the belief that you can always learn and improve your financial skills. Like, you're not stuck where you are now.
Oh, I like that.
It's not about being, like, born with some money gene. It's about actively seeking out knowledge and seeing challenges as opportunities to grow.
Yeah, it's like taking control of your financial destiny.
Exactly. All right. You ready to talk about mindset?
Okay, this is where it gets a little woo-woo.
Maybe a little bit, but it's so important. The article talks about developing a wealthy mindset. And to be clear, this isn't about, like, greed or materialism.
Okay, good, because that's not what we're about.
Not at all. It's more about, like, adopting beliefs and habits that support your financial well-being.
Okay, so what does that actually look like?
It's about believing that you're capable of achieving your financial goals, focusing on abundance rather than scarcity.
Like what you have, not what you don't have.
Exactly. And cultivating a sense of gratitude for what you already have. And the podcast also talks about the importance of your social circle.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like who you surround yourself with can really impact your financial success.
Okay, so find your tribe, right?
Exactly. Find people who support your goals and, maybe distance yourself from those who are constantly dragging you down or discouraging you.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, another potentially uncomfortable topic. Talking about money.
Oh, yeah. It's such a taboo subject for a lot of people.
It is, but we need to break that taboo.
Absolutely. Get comfortable talking about money, both with yourself and with others. Track your spending, create a budget, know your net worth. Like, these are just basic financial hygiene habits.
Okay, and don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it.
Yes. There are so many resources available, financial advisors, online communities. You don't have to figure it all out on your own.
All right, let's talk investing.
Okay, everyone's favorite topic.
Uh-huh. Yeah, but it can be intimidating for a lot of people.
It can be, but both sources really emphasize the power of compound growth, which, it's basically the idea that your money earns interest and then that interest earns interest and so on.
Right, it's like a snowball effect.
Exactly. And the earlier you start, the more time that snowball has to grow.
So even if you can only invest a little bit right now, it's better to start than to wait.
Absolutely. And there are so many options available now, like index funds and ETFs that make investing accessible to almost anyone.
Okay, so time is on your side when it comes to investing.
Absolutely. It's your greatest ally. All right, ready for the last big idea.
Hit me.
Giving back.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, we haven't really talked about that yet.
Yeah, but it's a really important part of the whole money conversation. Both sources talk about aligning your financial goals with your values. So if giving back is important to you, make it part of your plan.
Like set aside a portion of your income for charitable donations.
Exactly. Or volunteer your time, whatever feels right for you. It's about using your financial resources to make a positive impact.
Okay, I love that. So we've covered a lot of ground in this section, lots of practical strategies.
And the key takeaway here is action. Knowledge is only powerful if you actually use it. So take what you've learned today and put it into practice. Start small, make a plan, and take those first steps towards building that financial future you want.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be perfect, right?
Not at all. It's a journey, not a destination. Just keep making those consistent, positive choices day after day, celebrate your progress, and ask for help when you need it.
Okay, so we've talked about all those sneaky mental biases, right? And we've even gotten into some like really solid strategies for building wealth.
Yeah, like the practical stuff.
Right. But I feel like there's this other piece to this whole puzzle that we haven't really touched on yet.
What do you mean?
Well, it's like, even when we know what to do, there's this part of us that, like, gets in our own way.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like self-sabotage.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we're our own worst enemies sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And it can be really hard to overcome.
So let's talk about it. Let's, like, expose those self-sabotage gremlins and figure out how to, like, beat them at their own game.
Okay, I'm into it. Where do we even begin?
Well, I think one of the biggest culprits is negative self-talk.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that little voice in your head that's always like, you're not good with money, or you'll never be able to afford that.
Ugh, that inner critic is the worst.
It is. And the podcast script calls these limiting beliefs, and they can be so powerful, right?
Absolutely. If you keep telling yourself something, you're eventually going to start to believe it.
Right. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. So the first step is just noticing that negative self-talk. Like, pay attention to those thoughts as they come up. And then once you're aware of them, you can start to challenge them.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we challenge those negative thoughts?
Well, ask yourself, is this really true? Like, what evidence do I have to support this belief?
And often you'll find that those negative thoughts are based on, like, past experiences or just fear, not actual facts.
Exactly. So instead of just blindly accepting them, try to reframe them into something more positive and empowering.
Okay, so give me an example.
So instead of saying, I'm bad with money, maybe try saying, I'm learning to manage my finances better each day.
Okay, yeah, that's a much more helpful way to think about it.
It is. It's a subtle shift, but it can make a big difference in your attitude and behavior.
So besides negative self-talk, what other self-sabotage gremlins should we be watching out for?
Procrastination is a big one.
Ugh, yes.
Putting things off.
Like creating a budget, investing for retirement, all those important financial tasks that we just don't want to deal with.
Right. We tell ourselves, oh, I'll get to it later, but then later never comes.
And the longer we wait, the harder it gets to actually take action.
So how do we stop procrastinating?
Well, I think a big part of it is breaking those big, daunting tasks down into smaller, more manageable steps.
Okay, so instead of create a budget, it's track my spending for a week.
Exactly. That
What?
feels way less overwhelming.
Totally. And maybe set deadlines for yourself, too, just to, stay accountable.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And don't forget to reward yourself for completing those tasks.
Oh, yeah. Make it fun. Celebrate those small wins.
Exactly. It's all about positive reinforcement.
Okay, ready for another sneaky saboteur? comparison.
Yeah, yeah. That one's tough, especially nowadays with social media, right? It's so easy to compare ourselves to others and feel like we're not doing enough or we're not good enough.
Yeah, we see those highlight reels of people's seemingly perfect lives, and we start to feel bad about ourselves.
Right. But we have to remember that social media is not real life.
It's just a curated version of reality, you know? People rarely share their struggles or setbacks.
Exactly. So focus on your own journey.
Yeah, and celebrate your own successes, no matter how small they may seem.
Right. Comparing yourself to others is a recipe for misery.
Okay, what about perfectionism? Do you ever struggle with that?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I like things to be done well, but sometimes I get stuck trying to make things perfect.
Yeah, and when it comes to finances, that can be a problem.
Because if we're waiting for the perfect time to invest or the perfect budget to stick to, we might never actually get started.
Exactly. It's more important to take action, even if it's not perfect.
Right. Progress over perfection.
Exactly. Just get started and then adjust as you go.
Okay, so we've talked about negative self-talk, procrastination, comparison, perfectionism. What else?
Self-doubt, that nagging voice that tells you, what if you fail? Or what if you're not good enough?
Ugh, yeah. Self-doubt can be so crippling.
It can really hold you back from pursuing your goals.
So how do we overcome it?
Well, I think self-compassion is really important here.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means being kind to yourself, you know? Remind yourself that you're capable, you're learning, and it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah, we all make mistakes.
And celebrate your successes, no matter how small they may seem.
Right, those little wins add up over time.
They do. And surrounding yourself with supportive people can also be really helpful.
Yeah, people who believe in you and your goals.
Exactly. They can help to quiet that inner critic and give you the courage to keep going.
Okay, so we've uncovered a lot of these self-sabotage gremlins.
Yeah, we've named them. Now we can tame them.
I like that.
Yeah.
So what's the key takeaway here?
I think the most important thing is to remember that these negative patterns, they're not invincible.
Okay.
We can absolutely overcome them with awareness, self-compassion, and the right strategies.
It's about recognizing those patterns and then consciously choosing to replace them with something positive.
Exactly. Shifting from a mindset of fear and scarcity to one of abundance and possibility.
I love that. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the psychology of getting rich, what's that one question we want to leave our listener with?
I think the best question is, what steps can you take today to overcome those self-sabotaging behaviors and start building the financial future you deserve?
Yeah, it all starts with that first step, right?
It does. And
Yeah.
remember, it's a journey, not a destination. You don't have to do it all at once.
Exactly. Just keep learning, keep growing, and keep moving forward.
This has been a really great deep dive. Thanks for joining us.